Hello, my name is Mark Baxter, and for nearly 40 years, I've been helping singers all around the world. And the reason I'm speaking this way is that I only have a short amount of time to let you see something that's invisible, yet it's influencing the way you hear voices and therefore the way you work with voices. You see, the way I'm speaking is not harmful, it's just annoying.
And yet, if I were to speak down here, that would be far more appropriate. And that's because of this invisible force called culture. Now, cultures come big and small. There are cultures in our hemispheres from east to west. There are cultures in countries. There are cultures, of course, in music genres. And then there are microcultures of all the households. The standard definition of a culture, I don't think suffices here. I prefer one that's more like an algorithm that's running our brain's operating system. It filters where we believe things to be acceptable and things that are not acceptable, and it provides a code of conduct. Most importantly, cultures are the foundation of bias. Now, of course, these biases start as implicit ones. They're perfectly unconscious. And as a singer, I ran headfirst into this when I was looking for training as a classical bias, with terms like legit and formally trained and proper technique surrounding me. And as a contemporary singer, I was deemed untrained and non-classical, whereas the term I prefer is popular. Now, this classical bias bugged me because, as I said, there was a training bias. So all of the instruction was based around proper support, placement, and technique. Now, over the years, since popular music has evolved into the giant that it is, I've noticed that that word proper has now evolved into the word healthy. And this is exactly how this implicit bias became an explicit bias. That now, of course, people want to sing healthy, but there's a standard here that's still a holdover from classical training. All of this, of course, seems to be backed up by voice science. Now, I'm not one to argue the science, but I'm just here to say if we had a different perspective as to where that science came from, it would have a different view for us. Let's go way back, and I mean way back to the rise of the Roman Empire, and then, of course, the fall of the Roman Empire. That's where some of the first writings about the voice can be found. Then, of course, there was a period of Chinese expansion and then a period of Chinese contraction. And right at the fall of the Ming Dynasty, the European expansion occurred. And this is as countries were looking for trade routes and different lands. There was this age of expansion heightened by the age of enlightenment and then, of course, the Industrial Revolution. But let me pose a hypothetical to you. What if those Chinese dynasties had succeeded? What if they expanded along with all of the sensibilities of their Eastern philosophy? I think our science would look very different today because of those cultural differences between East and West. Well, that didn't happen. So now a healthy voice is considered a Western European aesthetic and technique. And that's not really because of science. That's because of colonialism and imperialism, which leads me to the contemporary commercial music label. And I'm concerned about this simply because all the performers that I work with, and there are thousands of them, exactly zero of them ever say they sing contemporary commercial music. They always just say they sing whatever subgenre they're into. So the point here is that the CCM label has become a teaching moniker, and I think we can do better. So as a teaching moniker, I noticed that these terms are still being used under contemporary auspices. And you don't have to be a linguistic expert to know what culture they're coming from. So as educators, I'm going to pose a question. Is our goal to educate or is our goal to indoctrinate? You see, everybody deserves to pursue a healthy sound, and that should not be dependent on a Western aesthetic, as all of the professional singers that I work with are all seeking a healthy African sound. As in that huge umbrella that is the popular music tree, if you will. All of these, and these don't, there's many more than this that can't even fit on my screen here. But if we shake that tree just down to the very thickest branches, these genres all have roots that bear down to one locale, and we know where that locale is. It's Africa. And we know how this happened. It was through slavery. And it's in the hearts and souls of those slaves where the sound of their motherland is what came wafting out and eventually evolved into what we now know as the popular music umbrella. So I'm just saying we could do better at labeling this when training. Because if we look at the differences between Afrocentric music and classical, there are stark changes that should reflect in the teaching. Breath management is consistent on the classical side, and yet it is varied on the Afro side. We look into resonance, we'll see that there is a convergent resonator that dominates classical singing and a divergent resonator that dominates the Afrocentric sound. And then the first formant in classical singing couples with the first harmonic. Yet in Afrocentric singing, that first formant couples with the second harmonic. There are fixed registers in classical singing, and there are fluid registers in Afrocentric singing. The timbre is consistent in classical singing, and it is varied or fluid in Afrocentric singing. So all of these vocal behaviors are what I'm saying are under an umbrella. Yes, there are cross-pollinations that occur, and in doing so, I just created this term, AfroCanto, to reflect that. Because I'm sure we all agree, healthy equals balanced vocal behaviors. Now, don't think of this as something to do with race or even national origin. The Voice Foundation is honoring two incredible singers, very successful, and they're both noted as being different disciplines. So what I'm saying is Vladimir is representing bel canto and John is representing AfroCanto. And of course, John is not of African descent, and nor is Vladimir of Italian descent. So I will leave you with this, just combining these two words from an Eastern philosopher you may recognize. We have the beginning of wisdom is to call things by their proper name, by Confucius.
My name is Mark Baxter, and I can be reached at this website. Check your bias.
Don't you see? Can't you see?